in order. Thank you, everybody online and in person here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to the budget workshop. All right, David, you want to report, Chair?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda for tonight's workshop.
Any questions on tonight's workshop agenda at this point? All in favor?
I think.
So, any opposed?
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion we approve the minutes from the April 9th meeting.
No.
No, we're not gonna do it.
No, we're gonna do that at
Yeah,
the
that's
meeting.
Monday.
This is just a workshop.
Okay,
Okay, so you want to take the proposed and presentation, get that walk through where we are
no,
at this point?
Yeah.
And talk about recommendations and gaps.
it's wrong.
Just before we get started, this is a new process for us. So tonight our goal is to present further information about the proposed 24-25 school budget. And we are a small school district. If we discuss current positions that can be attached to people, the board will need to go into executive session, as we don't want to talk about personnel issues in the public session. But hopefully at the end of today's session, we will have answered some of the unanswered questions at this point. And Mr. Carroll and I are going to present together.
Okay, for those in the audience that I may or may not know, my name is Scott Carroll. I'm the school business official here at Geneseo, and I've been on the job for about 4 months. And so previously before that, I was a principal for 12 years, an athletic director, assistant principal, as well as a school counselor. So for those, just kind of giving some bearing as to myself and who I am. So welcome to tonight's budget workshop. We're going to provide some information to you. If you guys can't see and if I'm in your way, I apologize. So I don't know, where is best for me to kind of stand. So I might be in and out, okay? Okay, so here's our budget workshop. I will not be present on Monday. Cindy will be here and we'll go over the board agenda, the board meeting. And really, we have to come up with a number that we feel confident in that we can approve, okay? That will go out to the voters on May, which is in the 21st. That's where, the voters will approve it 7 to 7 in the auditorium or 8 to 8 in the auditorium. And prior to that, on the 14th, there will be another public workshop that we will sit here and we will go through and talk about next year's budget as well. Here's kind of the strategic plans and the goals. Again, this has always been at the crux and the core of what we do, making sure that we have academic rigor for all of our students and making sure that we hit them in the career, college, and military field of their choice. Number 2, making sure that we have staff, student, and supports in SEL, social emotional learning. Number 3, clear, concise, and transparent communication. And then 4, really my job, making sure that we can marry all 3 of those goals together. So here are some of the guidelines, okay, that when we came up with and we really kind of sat down as an administrative cabinet, this is really kind of the guidelines of what we did. So we made decisions based on students and not adults, okay? We didn't necessarily not engage in, new programs are eliminated at first kind of decision making. There were some things that were added because of the ARP funds and monies and things of that nature. That's not necessarily saying they're all going away, okay? We have to make sure that we honor all contract commitments, okay, both legally, with IEPs, things of that nature, and for each union. Really want to make sure that we bring maximum value to the taxpayer. So state aid, want to make sure that we run some things through BOCES to make sure that, for example, when we do the local capital outlay project and you have $100,000 of work that's being done, you're doing that $100,000 of work, you're really only $30,000 because you're getting 70% of that back on your state aid. So that's huge. And really looking for ways to be more cost effective in our current staff. How do we increase efficiencies? Fiscal integrity, making sure that we are preserving, this budget and really for budgets here on and out. So having a 3, 5 to 10-year plan, long range, making sure that we're not only fiscally responsible now, but also maintaining that fiscal responsibility to you and the taxpayers. And then making sure that we support the Board of Education's reserve plan. You know, currently, right now, that was adopted in 2022, we should be looking at around roughly $5 million in reserves. That's not the case. Currently, right now, we're at about $3.6 million. So we have not met that mark that we would like to get to in terms of where you were at back in 2022 and a reserve plan.
And as we move through this budget presentation, you will see, as Scott shares, the steps that we've taken with the administrative team. These were really the decisions that were at the core of the decisions and the reductions that we've made. You know, our primary focus was to preserve programming for our students as well as preserve our people. We've had to make difficult decisions when 75% of our budget is salaries. We do have to make difficult decisions during difficult budget times.
So timeline, where this all began before I got here. So our previous business official had left. We replaced that with Mr. Whelan, Dr. Whelan. He came in and in November, he sat down and was able to have a discussion with all the administrative staff. Really kind of sat there, wish list, appropriations. And at that time, the appropriations, correct me if I'm wrong, were over $28.5 million. Okay? Our revenue for this school year is $25,447,338. So think about that gap back in November, okay? So same thing, he met with the individual administration. I also came in because I was new, wanted to really look at this from a bottoms up approach. We basically have rebuilt this entire budget twice, okay? And there's nothing there, okay? We have trimmed, skimmed, and trimmed everything to get to where it needs to be. The validation of the current data compared to last year, I'll show the year to year from this year's budget to the proposed budget. Determination of the capital project, I think we have to be very cautious of this, okay? So we have a tax cap right now. I'll go through the tax cap. We have a levy. I'll go through the levy. But we also want to go out to the voters in the fall for our project to repair our gym, okay? To do renovations to the auditorium, potentially the cafeteria. Those are all things that I think we have to be cognizant of in terms of where this budget is, and then also how to approve one in the fall as well. And again, I can't stress enough, this has truly been a bottoms-up approach. I have a wonderful mentor, has coached and mentored me into how we do this, and it's been a lot of long nights, a lot of long weekends, but we have done that and really have worked together. I can't thank Stephanie Hurley enough, Bruce Keeperano enough, as well as Cindy for really kind of coaching me through this and us through this. You're good. So the current climate, so everyone knows, art funds went away. So the expiration of the art funds, that was fundable money that we had for 3 years. It ends in October, and basically we are unable to use it anymore. Last year in foundation aid, we received $1 million, okay? This year in foundation aid, we're receiving $210,000. So there alone, you're looking at an $800,000 decrease. Still awaiting the governor's budget. When I say the governor's, is really the legislative budget. So the governor has basically sent out their budget, has approved it. However, the legislation has not. So that's still kind of in limbo. So really kind of assembling the plane in midair right now. Again, we've scrutinized each budget line. We want to make sure that we're offering equivalent program to the years past and making sure that it's the exact same, however, becoming more efficient. Again, we still have to make improvements to our facilities. I've talked, and you guys have heard this, about our boiler situation. We got quotes back last week that threw me for a loop. We were told originally that they were going to be X. They came in extraordinarily high. To replace one boiler right now, we have 3. One is completely dead. The other one is on life support. We have 1 current functioning. The one on life support to replace would be about $415,000. To replace 2 would be about $715,000. The lead time on that is 4 to 6 months. So in order to have heat in the winter and have school, we have to make an executive decision really on that as a board as to how we would like to do that. And also too, again, want to make sure that we stress tax cap responsibility, okay? Making sure that we are responsible, especially not only now, but also to the upcoming capital improvement project. So here's kind of the starting point. So if you can see how everything plays out here's how we got here. Our revenues must meet our expenditures. Our revenue for this school year is $25,447,000 or $447,338. That's our revenue. And this is how we got here. Property taxes. This is really the biggest piece. You'll see a slide later on down the road. There are 2 districts out of the 22 in GV BOCES that over half of their levy accounts for their budget. Geneseo and Livonia. That's it, those 2. And right now, we get 12.5 if we were to go out at the tax cap, $12.5 million from the levy.
And I think it's also important to note that we are using $600,000 in other revenue of, appropriated fund balance and of reserves. So whenever we talk about where's that revenue coming, can we utilize our reserves? We have to be very cautious of that deficit spending pattern that we've been in. This would be the 2nd year of that deficit spending pattern, and we'll get into more detail about that, but it's something we have to be very cautious of.
So here is the revenue year on year. Again, we're about $1.2 million increase, which is about a 5% increase from last year. You'll see here is the year to year change. When you come over here. Again, here, no, you're good. Here's the 3.8%, that's $461,000. Again, something to kind of hit upon if we do not approve the 3.8 tax cap and don't go out at our number, this would be an additional cuts that we would have to make. So if we go back out and we don't approve that, now, obviously, we're getting in the cart way before the horse. There are some things that we can, of course, we can do some things with that, but again, if that's not approved, there could be potentially more cuts here. And then you look at some of these items, again, we're not going out. Last year, we almost spent $400,000 out of appropriated and unappropriated fund balance. We're not doing that, so we have cut that down. So again, I think we have to determine the potential outcome of the legislative budget. We may receive more funding. I think if anything, it's not going to be anywhere near what we thought it was going to be, maybe $50,000, maybe, which is great, but still, that's not a whole lot. And then again, we had cabinet identification of prioritizations. So we tiered everything, tier 1 cuts, tier 2 cuts, and tier 3 cuts, reductions, basically, how to trim this to get to our number. That was all cabinet identified.
And when Scott talks about that potential revenue gain, the piece that the legislators seem to have made some progress with the governor in regards to the budget is in regards to the CPI. So the governor made a change this year to how she determined that component of the equation. So it used to be based on the annual CPI, which is around 4.12, I believe. And so she did a 4-year average, which dropped that down to 2.1. So when we originally received our state runs in November, our foundation aid increase was 310,000. It was reduced to 210,000 in January because of that CPI equation change. So what we're hearing is they're not going back to the 4.12, but that there'd be somewhere in the middle, possibly to 2.8 CPI in that equation. So for us, we're thinking conservatively, the most it would be $50,000 increased revenue from foundation aid.
So let's get into budget reductions. Again, bottoms up approach, BOCES, looked at it all, tech, services that are ongoing that we were outsourcing, contractual software, potential retirements, so math and world language, an aid position, copy position, school monitor position, new staff that we thought that we were going to want to hire and add. We did not do. That was ESL, special ed, and elementary. Debt service, we stripped everything away. Sometimes we kind of look at that, maybe pay a little bit more down on interest principal. We went to the bare minimum of what we're paying on. And then Title I's, a lot of things that Mr. Van Epps had that we're reallocating that money for staff salaries, also curriculum development, as well as mentors as well. So here's kind of the reductions. Disbursement of work. So the current administration will take on a lot. So PIOs, Public Information Office, that's something that you'll see on the website, newsletters, things of that nature, that will come in-house. homeschool, we'll take that on as well too. We were paying for a service through BOCES with that. So all the IHIPs and things of that nature, individualized home instruction plans, things of that have to get approved, we will take that on. CIO, Central Information Officer, huge component of the district. All those uploads that go to level 0 dictate our state aid. So if they are not accurate, or there's a number that's missing, that's gonna be a major complication in terms of foundation rate and state aid that we get. That's gonna come in-house. And then payroll is the biggie. We have 2 months to really kind of strip that away, have actual training and bring that on. There are numerous mistakes that have been made. And while I would love for another year to really kind of get my feet under me, it's gotta happen. Not only is it a savings, but there are so many mistakes that happen on a daily basis in terms of payroll that in that office, we got to pull the plug. And so we have 2 months now. I've called EduTech to try and have one person come in and help train our staff. But that's going to be a huge transition, and that starts July 1. So here's kind of the tax levy and kind of like, a little forecast. So here's the actual levy, okay? And this was 23-24. The actual levy was 4.2, okay? I have in my list here, kind of like a history, and I understand the traditions and the history of Geneseo. Having a 4.2, that was what the tax cap could have been. We didn't go out at that, okay? We went out at 2.1. 1.9, okay? 2022, 1.75. 2021, 1.0. 2020, that was COVID. I don't know what happened. Couldn't find anything. And then 2019, 2.09. Okay, so traditionally, Geneseo's gone out 2% or lower. Okay, what that does is when you're at 4.2, that would be potentially $440,000 that the school district would have received. Going out at 1.9, trimmed about $230,000 to $240,000 of revenue that we did not receive. And every year you don't go out at the tax cap, compounds. That's money that's out there that we are not taking in to support our students and staff. Okay, so the actual levy, although the tax cap was 4.2, we went out at 1.9, the levy was $12,062,000. At the current tax cap at 3.8, it would raise to $12,506,000. That would be additional revenue to our district of approximately $461,000. And again, I'm not saying that we have to, but 3.8, it's $461,000. If you were to trim that, okay, hypothetically, say we know that potentially the Geneseo community is not going to support 3.8, okay? If you went out, say 2%, all right, that's going to be roughly $180,000 that we would have to reduce in our budget. That's already super thin.
And I think traditionally, the finance committee has really done their due diligence in regards to looking at what we needed from the community and not building our reserves unnecessarily and taking the money from our taxpayers. But what we're seeing is those increases in CPI have really, we have under the last 3 years fallen under CPI. It's now time that we really do need to go out at that tax cap, because the increase in our expenses require us to go out that 3.8%, and we'll get to a later slide, but one of the things I really think that we should continue to think about when we talk about that $461,000, on a $150,000 house, we're talking $5 a month. So on a $300,000 house, we're talking $10 a month. So when you think about that increase, that 3.8% sounds large, but to continue to offer all the amazing programs that we do here at Geneseo for our students, I think it's well worth that tax levy increase.
Scott,
Yeah.
can I just pause you for a second?
Sure.
So can you explain, the fact of how that affects the formula? When you leave money behind, that affects the current formula and the amount that you can raise.
Yeah, I mean, and really what happens is, it's very interesting. So like, we're doing the capital project, right? Via purchase buses, we're back on a rotation. We would like to continue that rotation. We have a project that's about to go out. You'll see in some slides later on. I think it's like 2027, 2028. If we do not bring that back onto our books, our tax cap, our levy will be below 2%. It'll be below 1. And so when you think about that, you're now widening the gap. So if you don't have $12.5 million and now it's 1% that you're asking for the levy, that's roughly like $90,000 that you're getting added.
Yeah.
So it's just, it widens, it compounds, and I think that's crucial where, I'm not saying we have to live there, but we have to have another project to have some of that, to bring that up, so that you don't have these spikes and these knee jerk, hey, it's 3.8, oh, hey, it's 0.9, hey, it's 3.3, hey, it's 1.0. That way it's somewhat level, it's flat, and it's consistent. And that's something that we're trying to bring to Geneseo.
Correct, and when you do, formulate your tax cap, for the current year, you take your tax levy from the prior year, that's part of the equation. So depending on what that prior year's tax levy increase was at, that's where that compounding component comes in, because if it's less than what we could have gone on at the max, then obviously what we're going to generate new money is going to be less.
And it's based upon actual levy, not what it could have been.
Correct,
Correct.
And just to clarify, CPI means inflation.
thank you.
So here's kind of the tax cap forecast. When you look at what do I get as a Geneseo taxpayer in terms of like the 3.8, 2% of it is really all to programming and staffing. Okay, the other 1.8 is going to be your capital project, which you went out to the voters and told that's what it's going to be. Some bus purchases, super small, and then a BOCES capital project. So really, the nuts and bolts of yet 3.8 is going to be instruction. It's instruction and operations. That's programming and that's staff for students. That is the crux. Why it's not 2%, it's kind of a misnomer, right? So, Governor Cuomo came out saying that you can't exceed 2%. That's not necessarily true, okay? So I think that's a big misnomer that's out there, and especially when you look at wage inflation, that's greater than 4%. When you look at health insurance inflation, that's greater than 7%. And when you look at pension inflation, that's typically 4 to 10%, having it 2% will be deadly for us. So there's got to be some give here. So here's kind of the tax component again. So 1.8 allows dollar for dollar collection of local share of voter approved capital projects. The 2% allows CPI or 2% maximum increase in property taxes. And again, CPI for this year is 4.12. To give you some sort of understanding. Here's what Mrs. Flowers had mentioned previously. So you have a tax rate 3.8. This is what it would look like on a $150,000 house. Looking at roughly 6125 at a $300,000 house, you'd be looking at $120 a year increase. Okay. So $5 a month for the $150,000 that it would increase, and then about $10 a month for a $300,000 house. What I thought was interesting, even with, the levy increase, one of the things that's going on, so with the equalization rates, Geneseo's taxes are actually decreasing. So they're actually going down. So they were 13.84 2023. They're actually going to go to $13.28. So when properties increase and they go up in value, taxes go down.
And our tax rate remains one of the lowest in the Genesee Valley region as well.
So here's kind of the proposed budget versus the 23-24 budget, okay? So you can see kind of the interfund transfer, 100, last year was 300,000. We're not doing the $150,000 capital outlay project this year, okay? Only doing the $100,000 that we're gonna get aid on. Some other reductions, so when you look at employee benefits, those are some things that we've taken out. It's about $210,000 is actually less. So there was some money that was in there. Again, we've stripped that all away and really gotten tight on what we can have in there to not really kind of have any sort of fluff. And then you look at some of the instructional components. This is again, instruction and employee benefits. You add 20 and 90 together. That's the 70 to 75% of your budget. It's about 18.5. So just for instruction and for benefits to really instruct our students, you're looking at about $18.5 million. Okay. Instruction this year is up 1.13. Debt service, we're up $80,000. When you look at transportation, we're up $232,000. And a lot of that, not a ton, a lot of that is some of the merged sports it's kind of a double thing because it's great that we offer that and we would love to keep, and we want to keep that in. It's just every time we do that, you have the cost of the sport, plus you have the cost of transportation, fuel, driver, unaidable miles. That is an added cost. Here's the breakdown. You have your general support, your instruction support, transportation, employee benefits, debt service, the interfund transfers, all that together comes up to our number, 25,447,338. Here is just a randomized tax levy increase across GV BOCES. Again, not alphabetized, completely randomized. There's only one district, which I find amazingly, they must have a ton of reserves, is going out at 0%. Kudos to them. Yep, there are others that are in the 2s, there are some in the 3s. I think you said Attica just came out,
Oakville, Alabama.
Oakville, Alabama,
4.02.
4.02. And again, this was one of the things that I mentioned earlier. Geneseo and Livonia are the only 2 districts in GV BOCES that over 50% of their levy, their income for the actual school year comes from their tax levy. Put me on your toes here, John.
People keep coming.
Yeah, that's fine. Here's kind of our reserve forecast. So for the current school year, 4.1. You saw that we utilized about $780,000 this year as revenue for our reserves. When you bring this year, it's 3.6, okay? Again, we talked about the board resolution that you guys had in 2022 in terms of reserves and where you would like to be forecasted. Forecasted in 2022 was 5 million. Right now, you're at 3.6. Our budgeting for next year of that $600,000 is to replace that $600,000. I say that, however, we are so tight on what there is, there's about $100,000 that's left. If a high need student comes into our district, if the roof leaks, if we don't do the boilers and the boiler, we have to do an emergency project and pay upfront the cost of the boiler. It's kind of that like rainy day account that's there on a good school year. We come away, we haven't used any of that, we get the $600,000. We then go and replace that. We're not in deficit spending. If that happened to occur, and I'll show a slide later on, if we don't maintain this and we go down more, that is something that can obviously hurt our credit rating. When we're trying to go out for capital improvement projects and loans and bonds and everything else. So I think it's imperative that we have that reserve fund. And while we use it, we have to replenish that so that we don't get into deficit spending. Here's the year-to-year changes in terms of 24, 25, and then the actual 23, 24 budget in percentages. So you can see all of those. Few decreases.
Scott, would you explain certified, non-certified salaries?
Yep, certified are gonna be your, elementary, high school staff members, teaching assistants. Non-certified would be your aides, monitors, school bus driver, and things of that nature. So certified versus non-certified. Here's kind of the equipment and some interfund transfers, substitute salary. That's one of the things that's really kind of gotten out of control is subs. We spend probably about $15,000 each paycheck just in substitutes. So for a total of $30,000 right now, that is our spike right now. That's our historical trend of what we're spending per pay period and per month on subs. Talk about while we are tightening the belt, this is something where it's really kind of 2 pots of money in transportation, and we have a transportation plan, we have a rotation. This is something where we want to make sure that we continue to improve our fleet as the board has recommended. So that's something each year that we should be replenishing. Buses are typically good, probably around 7 to 10 school years. You could probably get off of it a little bit early and then actually make some money. And so that's some things that we've talked about, but $175,000 passenger, 77 passenger bus. Divide that by 10, we look at the aid that we're gonna get, the approximation cost per year is about $6,200. That's times for 5 years, you know, and then basically it's paid off. When you look at the small bus, that's a special ed one, again, $201,000 over that 5 years, approximately $7,200 after 8. So it's really minuscule in the grand scheme of things. If you think about just the upkeep and the mechanics, just the wear and tear on a bus, talking with Mr. Baylor, you're looking at spending about $10,000 on one of the older buses per year. Here's kind of the transportation and tax cap impact. So when you look at this, you know, where we're at, when you incorporate it into your budget, you look at it's 0.3%. You know, when you look at where the buses are in this 1.8, about 0.25, 0.3% of the actual budget and the impact on the tax cap. And so when you continue buying like we're doing, and it continues to be in the tax limit, the tax cap, eventually when we get down, it's gonna basically, you're gonna be doing this on the rotation if you keep it, and it will pay for itself. There won't be any spikes. You're basically keeping it in there. Those buses are then paying for themselves because it's already into the budget. Because we haven't typically done that in the past, we bought 3, we waited 2 or 3 years, we then bought another 3. It wasn't on a consistent basis. That's where some of those knee jerk, those highs and lows kind of came. Contingent budget, again, we talked about like if, and that's fine, if the number that we have thrown out there at 25,447,338 is something that is not, we can't get around, then we can obviously massage that number. If we just can't get to an agreement or people were to vote that down, we would go back to last year's tax cap, which is 1.9, which would be an increase to some of the reductions that we're already making, plus an additional $460,000. So here's the proposition and the budget vote. Again, looking to have 25,447,338 voted upon on May 21st, as well as the propositions for 2 buses and 2 transportation vehicles. So a lot of information there, and that's where now some questions and discussion.
Do you want to get into any of the individual items that you use to bring it down?
We can go back to that reduction slide.
And then there's many, 6,
There's only 3 that have asked to speak.
great, okay.
So these are the reductions that are currently in our budget. With removing BOCES services, contractual expenses, as we talked about, spending down our CIP contingent funds. 2 major expenses that we spend monies on from the capital improvement project was repairing our elevator and our chiller. Those were 2 items that we're breaking down on a regular basis, and we were spending a lot of contractual expenses and repairs. So we were able to strip $80,000 away from contractual expenses for that. Software obviously is a much smaller number, approximately $12,000, in looking at usage of some of our software that we're not currently using or that could be replaced by another item. We talked about breakage from retirements. That's about $74,000. That would be a budget reduction, and that would be not replacing our world languages teacher, Mr. Mao, or our math teacher, Mr. Groutman. And again, these recommendations did come from the administrative team. Our process was to have individuals bring items that we could potentially remove from our budget. We then rated them into tier 1s, tier 2s, and tier 3s. And so what you're seeing are tier 1 reductions from the administrative team. We are proud that we were able to, this adds up to about $900,000. Our gap was right around 1.2, 1.3 million. So we do have a little bit more work to do. And that's what we'll talk about tonight in executive session. But really looking at the aid is not cutting a person in our budget. We were looking to replace and hire a special ed aide. So this aide would go from what was currently in the library to a different position. The copy person was 11,000 at someone that came in at the end of the day to make copies, reduce a school monitor, new staff. That was 3 new teachers, an addition of an ESL teacher, addition of a special education teacher and an elementary teacher. We were hoping to be able to have that in the budget in case increased need, but we did take that piece out. And then that debt service, really looking at refinancing our debt on a shorter term band versus going out at a bond because it's a lower percentage interest rate. And that was a cost savings. And then, as Mr. Carroll said, the Title I grant, taking some of the professional development and curriculum work out of that grant and using that for salaries. So right there is about $900,000 worth of.
So you said the admin team proposed math and language, not refilling, not hiring the retirements. Can you explain the logic? Let's start with the math. Explain the logic behind not filling a math position when we are trying to build a STEAM program and we just put a multi-million-dollar building in the back.
Absolutely, great question. So when we look at the numbers in our departments, math currently had 7 staff members and the other departments in the middle school, high school have had 6. So we were able to, with Mr. Salatel's help, look to utilize staff members from other departments who may be duly certified so we continue to offer that same level of service. Mike, was there anything else you wanted to add to that or change?
We'll still need math staff, but it's coming from a different department.
So we're pulling someone from another area to teach math?
Yes.
I assume certified?
Yes.
And does that help us as we try to build the program, whatever we're doing, still looking for the curriculum on STEAM? But what are we doing in the future? And do we need to hire somebody there?
I would say at this point, we don't need to hire. I think when we look to move to build our STEAM program, much like other neighboring school districts have done, if an individual teacher has a particular strength, for example, Mr. Antonucci, graphic design, that's a strength of his. Is that something that he could then generate a program, bless you, that would then be taught in that STEAM area? Mr. Deletch teaches stats and a coding class. So it's not about hiring a person to be STEAM. Plus, we do have 2 full-time technology teachers, which is more than most districts our size currently have.
And explain the language side?
Yep, we had talked beginning of last year about phasing out French. And so what we're currently doing is we're struggling to hire. We have hired 1 language teacher who is certified in both French and Spanish. And so our goal is to make sure that we help phase out those students that had entered French and are able to get through their end of graduation courses. But we also do need to hire another Spanish teacher. We just had one turn us down. So we're going back out with a posting and trying to do that piece. And then currently we are using a teaching assistant who is fluent in Spanish to teach our Spanish classes. So we may need to look into doing some of those creative alternatives again.
I think in terms of like what we talk about efficiencies, so like right now, the current model is A and B. Basically, if you're in middle school, you need 2 years for checkpoint A. Okay, you could do a checkpoint B though, and kind of do a 2-year on steroids. So basically in 8th grade, I take basically Spanish 1 and I have to pass the proficiency and I have to pass the class. If I do both, I have earned my 1 unit of credit. Okay, so they then could go on to Spanish 2 and Spanish 3, but right now it's a full year in 7th grade, which is a section. If you have 3, 2, 3 in middle school, that's 3 that a teacher is teaching, and 8. So basically that teacher is tied up, right? If you were to do the steroid version, you retract 3 sections. Now you're there, and they're still getting the same amount of credit. So just some things like that we could become more efficient on. The other thing I'd like to talk to in terms of like breakage, are like, well, what do you mean? Why is it only $70,000? I know that they make more than that. That's true, right? But when you have those two individuals, you add them all up, per the contract, they get an incentive, right? From that incentive, plus their sick days, at X amount of dollars, plus, depending on how many they have. Plus some of the other things that they did contractually, you're looking at probably $110,000 to $120,000 that we're paying out in retirement. Okay, so what they were making plus what they're getting. The difference, that's the breakage. And so a lot of people say, well, no, they were making X amount of dollars. You guys saved all that money. No, that's not necessarily the case. So, when you think about that, $70,000, if you were to hire a new teacher right now, minimum is 45, probably with masters, again, 50 plus benefits. A new teacher right now, $85,000, $90,000. Just with benefits, that's what it is.
Anybody else have any questions before I turn it over to who signed in to speak?
Scott, just a math question.
Yeah.
I think you said, 15,000 per pay period for subs.
Correct, 30,000 total.
30,000.
30, it was 15 per pay period, yep, bi-weekly, so total 30,000, yep. A month,
Okay, and 10 months, right?
correct, so it's roughly $300,000, yep,
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And does that include long-term subs?
yes.
Because we can't.
Yeah, everything is through there, yes, correct, yep.
The only long-term
Is-
subs we have are covering maternity leaves.
Okay.
Oh, and Spanish,
I think I.
because of some special ed programming, correct?
Can we talk about the boilers? And the fact that if those don't get fixed, we don't have school.
Correct. Potentially, I mean, none of us have our crystal ball out, and while we know that that's a high cost, there's also high need. So, we have three. One is following my diet schedule. It's done, right? It doesn't work. Okay? Number two is it semi-works, but if we have a brutal winter, it could go out in flame. Speaking with Mr. Davis, who I recommend, I value his opinion. He's like, if we have a brutal winter, we're not gonna last. Can we do it with one? Yeah, I don't think the teachers and definitely the kids are not gonna like it. And that's where we truly need like two. What that second one looks like, we could redo the flame. It gets $17,000 to $20,000 to redo that.
Yep.
Knock on wood, we might not have an issue and could save a ton of money, but that's a big gamble. That's a roll of the dice. It's crapshoot.
So. To remedy this. Would it be possible, like much like a proposition that we're doing for the buses, would it be possible to put a proposition out to the voters for just the boilers?
Not in time for the May vote and budget, and for this budget season. Could you do one separately? Yes. So because you have to have 45 days legal notice, you have to have 4 notices before the budget, we would not be able to put a proposition for a boiler on this budget vote.
How long have we known about this?
February, March-ish. That, we knew they were having trouble. March, that second one completely, we knew one was dead. The second one was kind of hemming and hawing. And the thing about that's super scary is all three are the same age. They were not kind of tiered in. They're all from 1987, so they're all the same age. And two of them, the one that's completely kind of flickering in and out, the two have all been redone and rebuilt. So it's not like we haven't tried to remedy this and keep it in-house and try and Band-Aid this along. They've been Band-Aided now. The pedals have been out. We need some more electricity.
So. What are the other possibilities?
So we met with M&E, mechanical engineer, and the problem is, it's not just as simple as removing the two and bringing the two more in, okay? So I'll try and get it as technical as possible, but I know nothing about boilers, okay? So the conversation was this. The one boiler is 8 million BTUs, okay? We have 3 of them for a total of 24 BTUs. The 1.8 right now is functional. And to get to that, one of the higher efficiency boilers is 6 million BTUs. with that 6 million BTU, and it's a high efficiency, you cannot use the current flue that we have. You have to line that flue. It also has to vent outside. Where they would place that, and with the high efficiency, it would not be able to vent outside. So we could have been correct with the actual cost of purchasing the boiler. However, with some of the additions and removal, having it married with day automation, those are some things too that, I think jump the cost. Now, one of the things that a very wise man told me, could you do just the boiler, high efficiency, and instead of having it married with day? And everyone would probably kill us, but could someone go down there and flip manually the boiler? Because I think that's where a ton of that cost would be, is that marriage of day controls and making sure it's all on the computer, it's running effectively. I don't know the answer to that. Could there be a cost savers there? I truly don't know that. That was in conversation today. How could we cut that down? So just kind of spitballing some ideas.
So if we don't go out to the voters as a separate proposal, how would we pay this?
That's something that, when we look at the end of the school year, and I think it's by some date in June, that we would have to sit there, if there has to be potential funds unappropriated that we could have, or unappropriated to put back into fund balance. Is that something that the board would like to utilize to have this expenditure? We can deem it an emergency project. We would get that aid over 15 years because it was in our BCS report, our building condition survey. If it wasn't in our building condition survey and it truly was an emergency, we would get the aid next year. However, that was not the case. The state will look at us and say, well, hey, you had it right here. Why didn't you guys do that?
And just for clarification, this was just recent news that we talked to the architect and our campus manager. That was in our original project, and that was value engineered out when we ran into budget issues.
And that's the 2020 building condition survey you're talking
Yes.
Other municipalities, I don't know if school districts can, something called a revenue anticipation note. So we limp along, boiler goes bad, we declare an emergency. Can the district take out a revenue anticipation note?
Yeah, I mean, there are things that we could do. In the brainstorming session that we had today, instead of doing that, we made some phone calls to other superintendents, and campus is making phone calls now saying, are you disseminating? Are you doing the same boiler project? Are there any that still has some life to it that we could buy or purchase, or they may donate, that we could take on to kind of limp along until we were potentially to get it through the SIP or something of that nature. So that's still kind of floating out there, but that was something that, we brainstormed today and made some phone calls. Mrs. Flowers was able to talk to some superintendents. We were able to talk to campus. So that messaging is out there, and now we're just waiting on that result.
And moving forward in the capital improvement project, obviously, the other two boilers that we're not replacing in an emergency will be part of that plan.
When retired positions, the breakage piece. What and how long is would the process be of reintroducing those if, say, we can get through for 2 years, but then have a shift in math or an interest in world language? What's the process of bringing them back?
I think it's the need, right? I think it's looking at numbers. I think it's looking at the board coming up with what's an appropriate class size. Like, we don't really have a guiding light to showcase us, like, what is our current, like, what do we all agree upon that is an accurate number that we could live with in terms of, students in a classroom setting. So I think a need, I don't believe there's anything in here where we're actually reducing the program. So I think if they went to the building principal and said, hey, listen, we're seeing an influx of students that want to take CAD or want to take stats or something that we're not offering. I think it's just kind of doing a needs assessment in terms of what that looks like. In terms of world language, I know that we're working with Geneseo College and trying to work on them to see how we can intertwine some services and have some shared services. So that's not to say that it's, necessarily done and that it can never come back. But I think right now that's something where it definitely is advantageous for us right now.
And there's always an annual process of course request. Mr. Salta always requests from his staff members to provide new courses. And then he determines which ones would make the middle school, high school course catalog for offerings for our students. So that's done on an annual basis regardless.
Any other questions? Or?
Well, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, keep
Okay.
it coming.
You wanna,
But I mean, this is getting down to the specific of like the line by line thing
Okay.
that we were presented. Do we
before we
want to
get to that, then let me let's listen to all. Allison?
What's high?
Oh,
So this will be quick. I just wanted to thank the board for having this meeting and to just tell you where GFA feels like they have been in this process. So I'm just gonna kind of go through where I feel like we've been involved in it. So after our last board meeting, Cindy and Scott and I had a meeting and we were talking about various things and they said, we're really in desperate places for the budget. We'd love to know GFA's ideas on this. So I went back to GFA and I sent out a survey and we had some people respond. I compiled the list and kind of ranked things by the things that were given to us most often, down to every single thing that people said, including one person saying something, but I thought it was important. If people felt like that was something we should talk about, to put it out there. I sent that back to Cindy and Scott, and that was then sent to administration. And then I sent that to GFA because I wasn't really sure where it was going, but once it went to administration, I thought, I better send it out to my people so they know what was sent on. After that, Cindy had asked that GFA meet with her to talk about some of the issues that were brought up and some of the concerns that she had. So we sat down and met on Tuesday to talk through that. When we sat down, I said, one of the things that I wanted to make extremely clear was that it would be difficult for me to stand behind a budget when teaching positions are cut and administration is not cut. And I felt pretty confidently that a large majority of my faculty association felt that same way. Cindy explained some decisions that were made, but I kind of reiterated that's where I was coming from. I've thought a lot about this because I'm a huge supporter of this school. I'm a taxpayer in this community. I want this budget to pass. There's no question. I want the budget to pass, but I really, in my heart, believe that we should not be cutting teaching positions unless administration positions have been cut. And I'm not sure where the administration positions are in Scott's, in his slideshow. I think it's in instructional, the instructional piece. I think they're lumped in there because I couldn't see them anyplace else. But I don't really see any administration being cut, and that still bothers me a lot. I'm in the math department. I'm the team leader of the math department, and I'm not sure how we can run things the same without another math teacher, and that hadn't been brought to me before I met with Cindy. The first time I actually heard about that officially was at the last board meeting. So to me, I feel like that was a piece that was missing. I shared that with Cindy. She said, yep, we should have brought you in, but I still feel like I still haven't been sat down and told who's going to cover those 6 periods a day that person is being a math teacher. So that's kind of where I am. I mean, I feel like, again, I want the budget to pass. I want us to have things run, but I really feel like there's more to look at as far as, have we really looked at administration and things that we've added that can be taken out. And I also just want to say, I'm here if you have questions. I can answer them to the best of my ability, as again, taxpayer, a teacher, a team leader, and our GFA president. So thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Who's next, sure?
Melissa Vasselli.
Melissa Vasselli.
Way over backyard. So I will be next to you guys. All right, hi, if you don't know me, Melissa Vasselli, special education teacher in the elementary building. I just wanted to share some of what we've been doing at the elementary level. Not sure if like community members or the board are aware. So we started the school year a little bit rough in the primary house, I would say, that kindergarten, first, second grade. We have a really unique situation happening this year in first grade. We've been hit with some really heavy hitters with behavior, things that, you know, even our veteran teachers we might not have seen in the past. Some of these kiddos are not our special needs kids, you know, they might not have an IEP, but they were taking up a vast majority of our day. You know, the crisis team is involved. We were pulling other staff members. There was fear for some of our colleagues in the sense that they were really like stressed out. It was a lot to deal with. We weren't really sure what day-to-day looked like. And it was super unfair for the kiddos. Like as a teacher, it was really hard to watch. I think what we were seeing is that some students were in a placement that maybe they shouldn't be in. And that's really hard in education because it's not cookie cutter. You know, right now our model in the elementary, if we do have an 811 classroom, which is full, it's actually 9 students right now. And then the rest of our building is just the co-teach model. We're lucky enough that we have a special ed teacher in each grade level, which is wonderful. That's really helpful because we're not really having to share caseloads. And then around December, I want to say we had a big staff meeting in elementary. Cindy came down. It was great. It was so awesome to have everybody come together. Like, these are all positive things. We sat down as a staff and said, like, what are we going to do? We have a couple kids, they're outliers. They're just not fitting into the mold of what we have to offer. So like your option is either you leave them where they are and they're getting suspended every other day, or we can ship them out. So we met as, you know, just a whole elementary. We came up with some ideas. And then the next day was really great. Just the special ed team met. So all the co-teachers, our special class 811 teacher came in. We invited OT in just to discuss like, kind of like the case study of these two kiddos. What could we do? At the end of it, I volunteered to move into a different placement. So I left 4th grade. I'm now in like my very own, that we're calling it an 811, but it's just a special class. And it's been amazing. It was awesome the way that the teachers came together, administration too, like we sat and we really thought about, again, like kind of the way you started the meeting, like it was about the students, nothing else. So we looked at these two and figured like they have the right to be here and we need to figure out how we can help them. Started in December, but really like, then we had break, it's kind of wild. So now I've been with my class for a couple months, and it's going amazing. The progress that these kids are showing is like absolutely outstanding. I'm lucky enough in my previous district for 9 years, I was a special class 611 teacher. So it's kind of was like second nature to jump into the role. I'm really enjoying it. They love coming to school. They love being here. It's amazing to see like the empathy and tolerance I'm seeing from other students. Kudos to our 5th grade teachers. The older students have been amazing coming in and helping. Just to show them like social situations, helping out at recess. Like we just have some kids that are not sure how to be kids. And really the only way they're going to learn is by being with other kids. So the reason I'm speaking is because my fear is cutting those, because are not cutting, but not being able to add to the elementary staff means that come the end of the school year, I go back to 4th grade and my class is dissolved. Now I kind of knew that going into it. We said we're just going to do this temporary because we're not really sure if they can even really handle what we could offer, or maybe they do need a more restrictive environment. However, I just feel like we're proving that they don't. They're being really successful in our building with what we have to offer. And I don't know, I just go back to they have the right to be a part of this community too. And it's really simple little things. It's like one of my students just joined baseball. And last night I had the coach on the phone with me because I live in the community, so they know. And hey, how can I help them tonight? What can you tell me about behaviors, or how can you walk me through what happens? And then I got the phone call last night. Hey, we had an awesome practice, successful, we made it. And I just look at those situations and things like, okay, I know it's only a few students, and I know that we do have options to shift them out of district, but they just lose so much. And they're 5 and 6, so they can't be here to say like, hey, we don't want to leave. And and their families aren't really sure. So I guess that's it. I just wanted to share that, like, I'm really proud to be a part of the elementary building. The things that I'm watching, the teachers and staff, and Ms. New has been so supportive in us thinking outside of the box. We've created so many different groups and social programs for this first grade crew. And it's really, really working. And I just think moving forward, if we just have to go back to what we have, we can't offer anything else. I'm worried what that will look like next year. So I just wanted to share, to say that I'm proud of what we're doing. I wish that we could continue doing it. And I would be sad to see some of our students have to leave the district. So, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Elizabeth West.
Elizabeth?
Hi, so I'm here to tell you about the value of the library aide position. For many decades, we had a full-time aide in each of our 2 district libraries. During budget cuts, those positions were reduced to 1 position. However, that position included an additional hour either before or after school, as well as time in the summer. That aide time was valuable. A few years ago, the library aide position was further cut and the additional hours eliminated. It is now proposed that the position be cut entirely. With each previous cut, either students suffered or the librarians received additional work. Last month, our elementary library circulated 1,551 items. During the current academic year, this is an average number of circulations per month. These books must all be checked in and reshelved. This amounts to hours of work per day, and it must be done. There is no feasible option, but adding it on to what I personally already do. The librarian is considered a program administrator by the New York State Education Department and is expected to manage and support staff in carrying out inventory, maintaining technology and student accounts, communicating with families, curating resources through collection analysis, sharing resources between schools, and more. Without an aide, all of this must be done by me. I was already letting many important tasks go undone due to the most recent reduction in our library aide position. We have not fully finished a full inventory in a few years. We have not had time to lead the collection. Communicating with families could be greatly improved. I will now have to do all these tasks on my own when I can't even get them completed with a part-time aide. The library aide used to manage many more book cataloging and processing responsibilities. I have absorbed much of that into my workday and after school hours. It is daunting to realize that I am now faced with taking on even more responsibility in this realm. I work nights. I work over the summer. A major part of being a librarian is collection development. Finding resources to support curriculum is something that I do at lunchtime, in the evening, and during the summer. When the district purchased a new social emotional learning program last year, I devoted many hours over the summer to analyzing what books were needed to support that program and where to order them from. It's fortunate that my kids play sports for GCS, and so I stay at school until 5 or 5:30 often, and this gives me additional time to process books that my aide does not have time to do during school days. Since I already have my days filled with library activities, I do not know how I will fit in more tasks that were once done by the library aide. I will be forced to neglect teaching information literacy in order to take on the clerical tasks of shelving and shelf reading books. When students come to the library to borrow books and I am in the middle of teaching a class, I will continue to deal with the dilemma of whether I should neglect my class or turn away students eager to read, which is what I do in the afternoon. Volunteers are wonderful, and I always have jobs for them to do. I never turn them down. I seek them out, but I cannot rely upon them to run basic operations, show up on a daily basis, and deal with confidential information. Over the last few years, this district has continuously reminded teachers that wellness is important. However, it is incredibly frustrating to hear that I should take time for myself, because at the same time, my workload has been steadily increased to the point that I am now asked to either do 2 jobs or neglect my professional responsibilities as articulated in any document laying out the role of the Library Media Center. I will continue working every free moment of my life, but I would prefer not to be asked by my administration how I take care of myself. Instead, I would just continue sacrificing myself in order to serve as both a librarian and a library aide because I believe in education and I believe in our kids. I have 2 requests. 1, can we please consider keeping the library aide position and instead cutting something new that was added to the budget over the last few years when we had additional money? 2, can this position be the very first thing added back if any funds are made available? As a side note, I value a well-rounded education. The cuts to math, and especially world languages, break my heart. I don't want any educational program cut to save my library aide. I'm willing to work my heart out. I just don't want the education of our kids to be cut.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Anybody else? All right. I would say if you have line item questions. First off, thank you. If you have line item questions, non-personnel related.
Yes.
the phone. Go ahead.
Yes, okay. I just had a question, about A 131049. It's a BOCES line item. And just looking at the expense with the encumbrance, it looks like it's above the projected expense. So if you want this and this, right?
Did you say 1310,490?
Yeah,
The budget is 94.
right.
Just
This
the
is what,
budget.
this is what we've expensed so far.
Yep.
This is what we're encumbering,
Mhm.
which adds up to 104.
So what that is payroll. And what was not in there was concentrated.
Okay,
So, which is like $35,000.
okay. So is the number in the new budget of 97,699 a good number?
That whole number, that whole budget item is destroyed.
Okay.
Payroll comes back, potentially no concentrated.
So the next one is also another BOCES line item. And that's A 1480490. And it's the same type of thing, so I just didn't know what. That's going, so last year's budget was 86. This year's proposed budget's 50.
Yeah, so we would have already stripped some of those items away and taken that down, so, with some of those BOCES expenses, again, where you think about disbursement and adding more work, those things that BOCES is not doing that they've always done, we're now doing that. That one, I believe, was, potentially the PIO, and while we were going through cap region, that changed and then went to GV, and then now GV is gonna now come on to an administrator, so, those are all things that disbursement of duties are gonna come back onto administration.
Okay. Item A 1680490. That's also a BOCES line. I was just wondering what is this, because that's a very large.
That is the tech budget.
Okay.
Data processing.
Okay,
And really, what that looks like in
I have,
terms of,
I've got a breakdown of all of those.
Okay. and I think that there was a miscommunication in terms of EduTech, AS10, which is how we receive some of those services, and they didn't marry very well. And so we found where some of those deficiencies were, and we also stripped a lot of stuff away. I mean, that was something that, Mike, I know you had questions with. I know that was something the board had questions with, but we really kind of went through that pretty religiously. And I can't stress enough that I really send a ton of kudos to the administrative team. They were very tough conversations, but we were definitely always at the forefront of having students and staff here first. And they were tough, right? There were things that we didn't want to let go, but a lot of that now is going to fall on John and Andrew, you know, not having a BOCES person here 2 days a week. And then also the CIO position as well.
Yeah, Matt, just for everybody else, Cindy and I did meet with Kevin McDonald just to look for any other stones that weren't unturned.
Yep.
And trying to find nickels and dimes. See. I'm disappointed we didn't find any. I get it.
We at least looked at the couch.
We still, yeah.
I think those are all the questions that I have that are
Okay.
non-specific.
Scott, can you clarify where administrative salary?
It would be in the certified. I mean, we can break that down. I know like you'll see in the budget newsletter that's coming out, you'll see the component piece with administration. That's actually decreasing percentage wise. So I don't have anything necessarily here, but I know I just sent it to Sherry and she has that. And that is something that has to go out by next week you have to get it to the newspaper. So that's all there. Plus it's forming from GB BOCES. Dan is doing that and getting that all out for the budget newsletter as well too. So you'll see the 3-component budget and what that looks like: capital, administrative, and instruction program.
And I think from what I've seen, you know, in studying this budget through, it's important to point out that while we're not cutting administration, we are piling more duties on the administration we have, right? We talked about-
100%. I mean, the disbursement
You're
of that.
gonna take on payroll.
Yeah,
John-
payroll's coming back.
John's
So
taking on more work.
yeah,
and
so with transportation, cafeteria, HR, now we're also taking on payroll as well. That's a big chunk. You think about some other people that are taking on CIO, that's a huge chunk, as well as the PIO as well. So those are things. John and Andrew are taking on a huge component in terms of what they have to do and with Chromebooks that come back that are broken, right? That I can't just have someone sit there, get a stack and say, hey, when you come, here you go. That's now gonna have to happen when they're there. So again, everyone's taking on more. That disbursement of duties is tough.
Any other comments, questions? Input? I think we need to enter an executive session. You're welcome to stay. I don't know how long it'll be. And we're gonna have some discussions about individual personnel.
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular persons and the potential abolishment of a position.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Go here. We'll be back.